Hello everyone and welcome to QUTV Game Day. I'm Lucas Laudentine. This is the pregame show for the contest between the Truman State University Bulldogs and the Quincy University Hawks. This is a matchup that has been historically one-sided, with the Hawks coming in with a 1-9 record versus the Bulldogs. Their lone win came in 2015. We now turn to Parker Livenstall. Parker?
Yes, thank you, Lucas. Here with us now is a man who has been on both sides of this matchup. He spent the last 8 seasons as the offensive coordinator for Truman State and is currently the head football coach for Quincy University. Ladies and gentlemen, Jason Kilday. Coach Kilday, how are we doing today?
Doing well. How about yourself?
Doing well. Thank you for asking. So, going on for the last week against UND, the game did not go as we wanted it to go. Got a lot of hand after the first half, first 30 minutes. What lessons did you and the team take away from that game, and what can you look at to change for going towards the rest of the season?
The first thing is, competitive strain, competitive endurance. Started really well, just couldn't keep that same momentum going, and then doing a better job really in the 8 minutes, the last 4 of the first half and the first 4 of the second half. I think it came out to be 21 points for them, and we'd only snapped the football 3 times, offensively. So being better there and being ready to, again, compete at a high level for 60 minutes.
Absolutely. Now, looking towards this week, as we mentioned, it's against your former team in Truman State. So I just wanted to ask, what does this game this weekend mean to you?
It's another chance to compete, and really nothing more than that. They're a great program. They've been playing at a high level for at least the last 5 to 6 years. So it's a kind of a measuring stick there to see where we are as a program, to try to be at their level in terms of consistent winning over a long stretch of time.
Now, reflecting on your time at Truman State, what lessons did you learn while being the offensive coordinator there that you hope to implement not just this season at Quincy, but for future seasons down the line?
Complementary football. Teamwork's your greatest competitive advantage. So offensive and defensively playing off of each other, and then adding in the kicking game to continue to apply pressure across the board of all 3 phases.
Well, Coach, I want to say it has been a pleasure to have you in the studio today. Thank you so much for your time, sir. And with that, we'll be right back.
Are you looking for a career that combines innovation, problem solving, and creativity? Quincy University's engineering degree program specializes in electrical and mechanical engineering, providing students with a well-rounded education with hands-on experience.
We're looking for exceptional engineering graduates with the skills necessary to take on the challenges of today.
Let Quincy University help you achieve your goal. Contact us today and we will design a success plan just for you.
So now we have heard from Coach Kilday. Lucas, what are you seeing from the Quincy Hawks this season?
Well, the Hawks come in with a record of 3-2 overall. I mean, every game they've played so far has been conference. And so while you may be happy kind of about how that start's been, they're coming off of a tough loss against the University of Indianapolis. They lost 47-10 with that final score. Really reflects the second half where things started to get out of hand. For most of the first half, it was a 1-possession game. If you want to talk positives, one of the positive standout performances was Anthony Gilpin, who went off for 6 receptions, 106 yards, and had a touchdown. But beyond that, there's not a ton of positives to take away for the Hawks. This was a season low in rushing yards for Tion Dollar. This was actually the first time all season that the Hawks have been outrushed by their opponents. And you talk about a losing formula. That, combined with losing the turnover battle 3-0, is another interesting trend that's come up for Quincy. As so far this year, they are 3-0 when they win or tie in the turnover battle, and they are 0-2 when they lose it. And so while the Hawks are looking to rebound from a tough loss, the Truman State Bulldogs are coming in riding a 3-game winning streak. Parker, what are you seeing on the Truman State side of things?
Yes, absolutely, Lucas. So with the 3-game win streak you kind of talked about, it looks like from Truman State we are seeing an entirely different team on the field. They started out the season with 3 losses. Their defense was struggling, but over these last 3 games, even though their average amount of points they give up per game is about 29, just about under 29 points, these last 3 games they've only averaged giving up 19 points. But the offense, on the other hand, now Lucas, that is where this team has shined all year long. It hasn't looked like they've lost a step. Matter of fact, last week against Missouri S&T, where they had a dominant 48-17 win, we had key performers from their quarterback, Dylan Hare, who went for 12 for 15, 207 yards, 4 passing touchdowns, no interceptions. But then that also comes into their wide receiver, Jackson Overton. He actually had a season high in yards with 106 receiving yards. And yes, you'll hear this right, 3 receiving touchdowns, which actually helped give him the leading amount of receiving touchdowns in the GLVC with 7. This team has looked really scary over the last couple weeks, and it'll be really interesting to see how the Quincy University defense can adapt to that, along with having one of the best running backs in the GLVC, Denham Cook, who him and Tion Dollard, they're right there neck and neck with one another. So it will be honestly really interesting to see how these defenses will pair up with each other when having to face those running backs.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up. We have a matchup of 2 of the top 3 rushers in the GLVC between Denham Cook and Tion Dollard. So far this year, they're actually really even. You have, of course, Truman State had the extra game with Quincy having their first game of the year canceled at halftime. But if you just look at the averages per game, they're both averaging 102 rush yards per game. They're both averaging right around a little over 6 yards a carry. They're both tied at 7 touchdowns on the year. And it's just one of those where it's really interesting when you see how it matches up against both defenses, because these are 2 of the top 3 run defenses in the GLVC too.
Absolutely. I like that you mentioned that. These rush defenses have been very, very efficient. Like you said, top 3 in the conference, but also with both these defenses, they're not very they don't cause a lot of turnovers, if we could talk about that. Interceptions for Truman State, they only have 4 on the year, and that's all from different players. And also, they don't attack the quarterback a lot either. And that also comes down to the benefit of the O-line, which is where all the running backs, especially Tion and Denham, thrive, is because of that O-line. The O-line is one of the key things in this matchup to look out for, but also that run defenses. This is a matchup that I think the trenches is going to be a big reason why one team may win over the other.
Yeah, that's why I think somebody to watch out for on the Quincy defense here. You got their TFL leaders here with Brock Inman at 5.5, as well as the defensive line duo of Matt Austin and Jalen Vaughn, both tied with 5 TFLs. And I think that that's going to be a big storyline to watch, is going to be which defense can kind of step up and get the other team's offense off schedule, get them behind the chains. But what could be interesting about that is that both teams have had receivers that have been able to step up when they've needed to throw the ball.
Absolutely. And you're talking about receivers stepping up. I mentioned earlier, Jackson Overton having that leading 7 receiving touchdowns in the GLVC. That is a huge part, because not only like with these run defense being so efficient, that might cause these 3rd and long scenarios where the teams are going to have to throw the ball, where we will see Dylan Hare face off against Drake Davis. And with Truman State, they have that game-changing receiver that if it's 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10, or 3rd and long, it's going to end up being a chance where Trajan Thornton is going to have to make sure he is guarding Jackson Overton to a T. Otherwise, that could cause problem for the Quincy Hawks there.
Yeah, and on the Quincy side of things, I mentioned Anthony Gilpin really having a great game in Indianapolis last week. That's not a one-off thing. He's currently 6th in the GLVC if you're going off receiving yards per game, and he leads the entire conference in receptions per game, along with 4 touchdowns on the year. So he has been a guy where when Quincy has kind of gotten behind the chains, or maybe if they're in spots, later in games where they have to throw the ball, he has been a really reliable option for them.
Absolutely, sir. I think this is going to be a really, really interesting matchup, because not only that, but this matchup does have major implications for potential postseason play. And then that's where this kind of comes into the standings of the GLVC right here. So with looking at the standings, UIndy is near the top. They are above everyone else. It seems like that their spot atop the GLVC will not be threatened, and that they probably have potentially a ticket punch to the NCAA Division II football tournament. But that's not just where this game comes to play. This comes into bowl game territory. Now, with how usually the bowl games work, the last couple of years, we've had the America's Crossroads Bowl game, where the highest team in the GLVC that doesn't make the NCAA tournament will play against the highest team in the GMAC conference, or the Great Midwest Conference, their highest team that did not make the playoffs. There's still a chance for both Quincy and Truman to sneak their way into that bowl game, especially, like I said, Truman had that rough start to the year where they had 3 losses. That really definitely hurts them going into talking about making a bowl game. But here, this game right here has a chance, because with Quincy having 2 losses in the conference and Truman State having 1, that still puts them in prime contention to get there.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, because you look at Quincy right now, they're 5th in the conference if you're going off of that loss column, but there's also a 3-way tie of 3 teams, 2 through 4th, all with 1 loss. And if Quincy can win that would give them the tiebreaker over Truman State, which would jump them in the standings. And then you have McKendree, who's also sitting at 1 loss, playing against the University of Indianapolis, which will be a tough game for them. So should they drop that one, then you'd be looking at Quincy jumping all the way up into 3rd place in the conference. And then you just have Upper Iowa, who, because they do own the tiebreaker, essentially has a 2-game lead, but they also have some tough games for throughout the rest of the season.
And not even only just that, but on the Truman State side of things, it's a big changing year for them with former head coach Greg Nesbitt retiring and his son, Kellen Nesbitt, taking over the job on an interim label. This is a big chance for him to prove himself and get his school into a bowl game like, hey, give me that full-time label. I proved my point, and I can be just as good of a head coach as my father was. But also, Truman State holds the tiebreaker over Upper Iowa because of their head-to-head win on them. So a win here for Truman State could start to get them in that area where they're like, we're really close to clinching a bowl game spot. And I think for such a young head coach like Kellen Nesbitt, it is going to be a big opportunity for them going forward to be able to qualify for that bowl game.
Yeah, and we heard in Coach Kilday's interview, he said this is a big game because this is, if you're going off of the preseason poll here in the GLVC, Truman State was predicted to finish 2nd, so this is by far one of the toughest tests left on the schedule for the Quincy Hawks. And as Kilday said, this is a big opportunity to prove that they're not just some new and up-and-coming program, but they're already here and ready to make noise in the GLVC.
Absolutely, you are right on that, man. I am really, really excited for this game. But with that, we are going to wrap up. This has been Parker Limenstall
And Lucas Laventine.
And we want to thank you so much for joining us for QTV Game Day. For more QTV Game Day events like this, be sure to check us out on social media and qmedia.net. Now, enjoy the game, folks.